Oh, we're live? Well, make sure I was just scrolling through Twitter here, so I want to make sure you guys know I've got a Twitter account. It's at James Yoder. I'm on there. I'm tweeting about Michigan football all day. You may not be following me, so just trying to get my Twitter followers up. So make sure you do. Before we get into the show, just a reminder, it's at James Yoder on Twitter. I told you about it last video or two. It's a big goal for us this summer is to get our Twitter followers up before the 2021 football season across the whole company at Chat Sports. So go ahead and follow me at James Yoder. Like, I'll make you a deal. You hit me up with a follow. You tell me you're an MFer, Michigan Football Report MFR. Hit me with a tweet. No DMs, just a tweet. I'm following back the rest of the month of May. So go ahead and give me a follow at James Yoder. I'm going to talk about Jim Harbaugh, all right? He just extended Josh Gattis, and I think people are trying to put the narrative out there that Harbaugh's got 2 or 3 years left minimum. I don't think that's the case. I think Jim Harbaugh is make or break here in 2021. I'll talk about what he needs to do and why I think he's make or break coming up on the show right now. Welcome into the Michigan Football Report from Chat Sports. I am your host, James Yoder, and I'm going to talk about Michigan's 7th year, going to 7th year football coach Jim Harbaugh, his future at Michigan, his future as a coach in a lot of ways, and why I think that the narrative being put out there by the media, the narrative put out there by a lot of fans, influential fans on social media, maybe even some former players, is incorrect, and what I expect to be the standard going into the season, and why I think Jim Harbaugh is really up against a rock and a hard place if he wants to continue to be Michigan's football coach beyond this upcoming 2021 season. So let's kind of take a look at it. It's year 7, right? There cannot be any more excuses, and that is really tough to think about from the perspective of a fan, because you know as well as I do, this is a really mediocre team coming back, at least from productivity. I'll roll through it really quick. We have absurd question marks at quarterback. There's no one even close to being proven at quarterback. We have maybe some answers at running back. That's fine. Okay, we got some answers at running back. Hassan Haskins is okay. Blake Corum, had a couple carries here or there throughout last year, and that's fine. Offensive line, a lot of questions, right? A lot of questions offensive line. A lot of questions from the tight end perspective. Eric Hall was letting balls knock off his hands all year. We thought he might be the starter going into this season. How about in defense? Aiden Hutchinson, and then question marks. You don't think Chris Hinton is not a sure thing at defensive tackle. There is no other sure things on that defensive line outside of Aiden Hutchinson. He's been injured throughout his career here and there. Linebackers, tons of question marks at linebackers, tons of question marks. Secondary, all of them are coming back, but really, really poor performance last year from that secondary. So year 7 for Jim Harbaugh, no more excuses, but it is on paper, in my opinion at least, his least accomplished team coming into a season outside of that first year, 2015. So I'm going to ask you this question. Before I go through all my talking points throughout the show, will Jim Harbaugh return as Michigan's coach in 2022? Type Y for yes down below in the comments. Type N for no. I don't know the answer. It's really tough for me to comprehend, because any other school in the country, I think Jim Harbaugh, based on what happened last year and the inability to beat Ohio State, the inability to beat a bowl game, losing back-to-back years against Wisconsin and Penn State, 3-3 against Michigan State, I think any other school out there, if he wasn't an alum, if he didn't have the NFL credentials that he has, Jim Harbaugh might be on the hot seat. I think he should be at Michigan, but his old college buddy, Ward Manuel, is the athletic director, so we'll see what happens. So type Y for yes, type N for no, and will Jim Harbaugh be the head coach in 2022? All right. Myth number 1 that I am seeing out there from fans, from media, is that all these new coaches, 7 new coaches have been hired on this staff. Obviously, Mo Linquist moved on, so there's 6 new faces on the staff, a completely revamped recruiting department, all kinds of new people. People said that means Jim Harbaugh's here for the long term. What I'm saying, though, is that the reality is that it doesn't matter who is on the staff. It doesn't matter if you're going to bring in all these new hires and sign them to 2- and 3-year contracts. More than 3 losses this year is unacceptable, and I see 7 games, at least on the schedule, 7 games that are very likely to be losses if Michigan doesn't play a B, B+, or an A game throughout that season. So I think anything more than 3 losses is absolutely unacceptable for this Michigan team in year 7 under Jim Harbaugh. For sure coming off what happened in 2019 and then the absolutely terrible 2020. How about this, myth? Oh, Well, it's not Jim Harbaugh's fault he can't compete with Ohio State. They have taken up their program, their talent on another level. They're with Alabama. They're with Clemson. They're better than Oklahoma. They're better than LSU. Are they? Yes, they're up there with those teams. But is that any different than the entire history of this Michigan football program? And I'll ask you this, I'll say that when supporting it with some facts, right? Lloyd Carr took over as Michigan's coach with absolutely zero track record as a head coach. Had never been one. Been Michigan's defensive coordinator. Do you think Lloyd was Michigan's offensive coordinator prior to being D, or was that Moeller? One of them. You guys know what I'm talking about. Gary Moeller, prior to him, was head coach at Illinois in between stints as an assistant at Michigan. Lloyd Carr came in and faced an undefeated Ohio State back-to-back years in 1995, 1996. What happened? He beat them. 1997, he brings his own undefeated team into Michigan Stadium to face a one-loss Ohio State team ranked in the top 4. He beat them. He lost them in 98 when Ohio State had maybe their best team of the 90s, but then beat him again in 99, beat him again in 2000, and then Jim Tressel came in, and things changed significantly. So Lloyd Carr went up against a back-to-back undefeated team in Ohio State in 95, 96, top 4 team in 97, and won all those years. That is no different, no harder than what Jim Harbaugh has had to face in any means. How about Bo Schembechler? 1969, comes in as head coach from Miami, Ohio to Michigan, a Michigan team that lost 50-14 the prior year. All right, in 1968, Ohio State coming off a national championship in 68 on a 20-some-odd game winning streak, was going to blow Michigan out of Michigan Stadium, just completely embarrass them in 1969. What happens? 24-12, Michigan beats Ohio State, the greatest team in college football history at the time. Michigan beats them. Bo Schembechler goes 6-4. Am I right? Yeah, 6-4. 5-4-1. Okay, I remember. I wasn't alive back then, but I have a good memory. 5-4-1 in his 10 seasons against the great Woody Hayes, right? Where Jim Harbaugh is 0-1 against the great Ryan Day, 0-4 against Urban Meyer, and would have been 0-2 against Ryan Day. But unfortunately, he didn't get a chance to play in 2020 last season. We all know that would have been a loss for Jim Harbaugh. So Lloyd Carr, Bo Schembechler, Gary Moeller, they all faced juggernauts in these Ohio State Buckeyes. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel, the Michigan Football Report by Chat Sports on YouTube. It's youtube.com/MichiganTV. Got the best URL in the game for YouTube. Got the best show in the game, at least according to the voters. Those voters being my mom, but nevertheless, the votes count. News, rumors, recruiting, no sugarcoating, all right? I am not going to just have all bells and fairy dust like Sloppy Sam Webb and all the local guys. If I think Michigan is doing something not up to the standards of the Michigan football program, if they could be doing better, if there are areas where the program is struggling, I'm not going to deny it, and I'm certainly not going to avoid talking about it. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button. We blew past 13,000 subscribers last month, trying to get to 20,000 before we get to the start of the season, September 4th, at home against Western Michigan. Let's talk about another myth I see out there. Jim Harbaugh took this new contract that's paying him half the amount he made last year. He's from $8 million or ish down to about $4 million that he's betting on himself. Incentive-laden deal for wins and conference championships and national championships and college football playoffs, right? But the reality, folks, is Jim Harbaugh had no other options. He has no other options currently. He had none at the end of last season. Whatever they tell you out there, I'm going to tell you the truth. Jim Harbaugh was ready to move on from the University of Michigan after the 2020 season, probably before the 2020 season even happened. I think there were some things going around off the field stuff that I'm just not feel comfortable talking about, that he definitely didn't want to live maybe in Ann Arbor anymore, but we'll talk about that maybe another day. Maybe someone will break that story at some point. But he waited until January to wait till the NFL season was over to see if he had any opportunities to go back to the NFL as a head coach. And maybe he wouldn't have taken one. Maybe he would have strong-armed him to get a better deal because he was looking at a 50% discount contract coming back to Michigan, which he ultimately got because there was no contract out there. There was no offer to be a NFL coach. And I think he has enough pride, enough loyalty that he wasn't going to shop himself to another major college football program. So this whole betting on himself, when you've got no other options, there's really nowhere else to bet. So I think that's a narrative that I just want to put to bed here that Jim Harbaugh had. He's betting on himself, yada, yada. This is the only bet he has. He either wins at Michigan or he's out of coaching next year, right? He's out of coaching. Maybe he could eventually come back or not, but this might be his last job. You never know. If you fail at Michigan, tough to take another job unless you're going to do what Rich Rod did and kind of take a middle-tier Power 5 program, try to turn him around like he did at Arizona, but didn't really work out for Rich Rodriguez. Next myth. Josh Gattis is here through the end of 2022, right? Gattis just signed a contract extension yesterday. 3-year deal originally, added a year because he's on the last deal of his, the last year of his contract in 2021. But here's the reality. I have no doubt in my mind that strategically, Jim Harbaugh did two things to account for the fact that he doesn't trust what Josh Gattis is doing, but kind of has to eat a little crow here that he hired Gattis and publicly put out there. There was like a 20-minute phone call, speed and space, all this stuff. Sharon Moore is now co-offensive coordinator. Matt Weiss is now the quarterback's coach, but he's like head of analytics, almost like an associate or assistant head coach from that perspective when it comes to what Jim Harbaugh thinks of him as. I think Weiss is probably the one on the staff, if Harbaugh is here long term and Gattis doesn't work out, that he probably gets the next shot at the offensive coordinator if they go internally. But Harbaugh set himself up well that he could either relieve Gattis of his duties and keep him on staff, but put play calling in someone else's hand, or fire Gattis altogether. With what we saw to Cade McNamara, it wasn't pretty. It was one half against Rutgers, then it really wasn't pretty in his play after that. A true freshman, and then a Big 12 transfer who didn't really do a ton at Texas Tech. He had a season of starting, etc. But with that being said, if what we see out of Josh Gattis in 21 resembles what we saw first half in 2019, or basically all of 2020 outside of the Minnesota game, Josh Gattis will not be, surviving as offensive coordinator of this football team past a few games if the team struggles, like many, including myself, expect them to do, unless there is a massive turnaround in the fortunes and the strategy of the offense of this Michigan football team. We're presented by Newsbreak today. If you guys haven't yet, please download the Newsbreak app. The more they're sponsoring us, they're allowing us to put videos out here on YouTube, but also put them on their app. They're trying to grow, and the more of you guys that download the app and, of course, follow the Michigan Football Report. So download the Newsbreak app on iOS or Android for your iPhone, for your Android. chatsports.com/MichiganNB. Make sure you use that URL. Type it into your browser. It'll drop you in the App Store. The Newsbreak app has stories from all your local newspapers, TV stations, bloggers on sports, politics, weather, entertainment, and it goes down to your local zip code. So if you live in a small town, we got news for you there with Newsbreak. If you live in a big town, got news for you there as well, and you get awesome sports content, including videos from the Michigan Football Report. So type that into your browser. I'll put it down in the comments and in the description of this video as well. If you forget or want to come back later and just click it from your iPhone, download it using our URL. Make sure we get credit. Make sure they keep supporting our show. Let's just get into the obvious stuff. How about the results on the field? Okay, people are going to say 2020 was an aberration. 2-4 season, a miracle comeback against Rutgers away from being a 1-5 year after starting off against Minnesota. But you're 0-5 against Ohio State. Okay, cool. Jim Harbaugh hasn't won a bowl game since 2015. Came in, turned the program right around. And I'll never forget what Jim Harbaugh did. I said during the season when I thanked him for his time at Michigan, and we appreciate what he did for the program, is the program was not in a good place under Brady Hoke. They had a really tough 2014, kind of 2013 as well, but not as bad. Jim Harbaugh came in, took a 5-7 program, put them in 10-3 right away. And they are a drop fumble against Michigan State away from going into the Ohio State game with a chance of maybe an outside chance the college football playoff in year one. Obviously, Ohio State beat Michigan up pretty good that day, but that was a great Ohio State team. Then you win the bowl game against Florida. But then it's loss against Florida State, loss against South Carolina, loss against Florida, and I think I'm missing one there, loss against Alabama. Outside of Alabama, that was a team that had Mac Jones, their quarterback, filling in for Tua. So there's not a game here that Michigan should have been expected to lose across the board. They were with Alabama, winning at halftime, really just didn't show up against South Carolina, didn't show up against Florida the second time, really just didn't play great against Florida State, down big, had a shot to win there. But nevertheless, Jim Harbaugh hasn't got done against Ohio State, no bowl wins against 2015, and this is the most damning part of his time at Michigan, is he has made awful coaching hires. Stay with me on this one. Only one of his assistant coaches in 6 seasons, only one assistant coach has gone on to be a Power 5 head coach. That's DJ Durkin. 1 season as defensive coordinator, went to Maryland, And he got fired after, what was it, a season or two at Maryland for, not having a very compliant environment with how they treat their players. A player actually died at Maryland. So I don't know if we can really count that one. Jim McElwain, that doesn't count, wasn't Power 5, was already an established head coach, came to Michigan 1 year as revitalize your career, went on, now he's at Central Michigan. Don Brown, he's flamed out, right? Really strong early, flamed out late, 2019 and then 2020, disastrous. Offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coaches, outside of Jed Fish in 2015 and 2016, maybe Michigan's best 2 years, 2018 maybe you could say too, under Harbaugh, have been disaster. Tim Drevno, he's out of coaching. Probably a reason why. You chose him over Jed Fish too, who's now a head coach at the University of Arizona. Pep Hamilton, okay, came in, but he didn't really do much in Michigan, and the offense regressed in 2017, 2018 under Pep Hamilton. How about some of these position coaches? Tyrone Wheatley was a hot name coming in, didn't last more than a couple years at Michigan. John Baxter, special teams coach, dropped snap against Michigan State 2015. He's gone. You bring in 2 offensive line coaches in 2017, Greg Fry. Eventually goes to Florida State. That was a weird hire. Ben McDaniels, the quarterback's coach for the last 2 seasons. The quarterback development has been absolutely awful under Josh Gattis, Jim Harbaugh, and Ben McDaniels just took that to another level, right? Think about the quarterbacks you had 2 years ago. You had Shea Patterson. You had Dylan McCaffrey. You had Joe Milton. You had J.J. McCarthy committed. And all those guys are gone except for McCarthy, and now Cade McNamara is in the fold. So it is kind of wild to think about how bad some of these coaches are. Not to mention 2 position coaches, 2 defensive line coach, linebacker coaches a couple years ago, Greg Madison, Al Washington, chose to leave your program to go to Ohio State. Madison was the co-defensive coordinator there for 2 seasons, but Al Washington just kind of took a lateral move, right? I know his dad played there. Nevertheless, I don't think that speaks very well for Jim Harbaugh's coaching and hiring acumen. So when I think back to the top of the show, I say people saying that he's got all these new staff hires equals longevity and equals he's got 2 or 3 years to turn this around. I disagree because his track record of wins doesn't say necessarily that should be the case, but also there's no guarantee these hires are going to be any good because his track record of 6 seasons of hires, of coaches, has been pretty bad. I'll give him some credit for Chris Partridge, took him out of the high school ranks, brought him on to Michigan. Now defensive coordinator at Ole Miss. We'll see how that goes, how long that lasts. He's going into his 2nd season. And the Matt Dudek hire, probably the worst hire of all. Luckily, he's no longer with the program. But Harbaugh hung his hat on Matt Dudek for 3.5 years as head and really one-man show of his recruiting department. And that was a mess. Has the Michigan roster ever brought on more bad fits? Maybe I don't want to say bad apples because I'm not kind of talking about their, these players' personalities and, their off-the-field stuff. But Michigan has had more transfers and more guys flame out and more players who air their dirty laundry publicly than ever in the last 3 years. And they're all guys that Matt Dudek went out and scouted, went out and looked at and told Jim Harbaugh, these are the guys that we should be recruiting. These are the guys that best fit what you're trying to build here as a Michigan football program, Jim Harbaugh. So that's that. Coaching hires. We'll move on. And I want to keep sticking the poker and the hot poker in your belly here as a Michigan fan. But I'm just being real here. Don't expect Jim Harbaugh to be the head coach in 2 years no matter what because you got a 2-year losing streak to Penn State, right? Started off good against Penn State. I think Michigan was 3-1 Harbaugh's first 4 years. Now you've lost 2 straight to them, blown out in 2020. You've lost 2 straight to Wisconsin, 2 blowouts to Wisconsin after starting 2-1 against the Wisconsin Badgers. Got absolutely crushed in 2019 and then murdered in 2020 at home, set all kinds of records for futility as a home team against Michigan Stadium. 3-3 against Michigan State, and there are a couple bad losses in there. 2017, that's a bad loss, folks. 2015, bobble the snap. I mean, I don't want us to keep talking about it, but that's a bad loss, even though that was a playoff team in Michigan State. In 2020, that was the worst of all. You're a 3+ touchdown favorite at home, coming off a huge win against Minnesota. To lose that game was absolutely inexcusable. So that's my thoughts on Jim Harbaugh's future at Michigan. If I upset you at all, if you're mad at me, go ahead and down in the comments. Let me know what you think about Jim Harbaugh's future. We will be back with more Michigan football videos here from Chat Sports in the coming days. Until then, go Blue.